Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. The Road to Autonomy is brought to you in part by Stantec Generation AV. Stantec Generation AV combines some of the most experienced AV experts in the industry with the resources of a global engineering firm. Stantec Generation AV provides education, consulting, assessment, and guidance to any industry interested in autonomous vehicles. Learn more at stantec.com. Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to have Thomas Bamonte, Senior Program Manager, Automated Vehicles, North Central Texas Council of Governments. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
I'm super happy to have you here because you run one of the most interesting, well-curated Twitter accounts for autonomous vehicles. And so somebody that enjoys reading your account, thank you. So I can't wait to have this wonderful conversation with you.
Great to be here, and your work inspires us, so thank you.
You're very welcome. To kick things off, I'd love to know, how did you first become interested in autonomous vehicles?
You know, back in 2005, I switched from working for a public transit agency to a tollway, the Illinois Tollway, and Pat Jones, who heads the IBTTA, said, "Why don't you write an article about transit and tollways?" He thought I was going to write an article saying transit should be subsidized by the tollway, and that would get his membership all riled up. But instead, I must have stumbled on the DARPA challenge or some article, and I said, I'm going to write an article that talks about this emerging automated vehicle technology, and maybe we can merge the best of highway transportation and transit through automated vehicles. And I put that out there in an article in his journal about 2006, and it got a lot of interest. And so for the next couple of years, I was like a voice in the wilderness going to conferences talking about it, and people thought that I was nuts. And then in 2010, Google said, hey, we're working on it. And all of a sudden, it was off to the races. But yeah, I really thank Pat Jones for asking me to write that article, because that's how I started.
It's awesome. Think about it. That one article changed your career path, change the trajectory of everything. It's really amazing how that one individual in somebody's life can change everything for the better.
Indeed.
So now you're down in Texas, which is a great state that's doing phenomenal things around autonomy. You're in the Dallas-Fort Worth region, starting to emerge as the home of autonomous trucking. Why and how is this happening?
Well, first you have to start with I'll just call it demographic strengths. We're a large inland port, and we have to be extra scrappy because we don't have a river or a seaport. We just have land. So we have to be extra innovative and extra supportive of our freight partners. And we're part of the Texas Triangle, growing market. We're part of international trade movements from Mexico up and down the corridor, 35 corridor to Canada. So those are kind of the background demographics of why we're well situated with our freeways, our tollways, our managed lanes, and our railroad capacity, as well as DFW Airport, which is a major driver in the freight space. You have that as kind of the foundation. And then we've been very fortunate to have a state legislature that has set out clear and supportive AV legislation. And then our organization, the North Central Texas Council of Governments, our policy board, has always pushed us as staff to embrace innovation and support innovation. So they've invested resources, people, and dollars to help us partner effectively with the freight sector. And that's led to multiple companies locating hubs here. And again, a real public-private partnership to build out the AV freight system.
Is DFW kind of the central hub for all of the activity for the inland port?
Well, I mean, yes, in the sense of we're, I think, nipping at the heels of Texas, or of Chicago, at least we will over the next 2 decades as a freight hub. But we've got east-west through Interstate 20 and 30, north-south with I-35, well-developed road network. And we're just well situated at the kind of apex of the Texas Triangle to host freight operations. It's a great central U.S. location where AV freight can reach basically all of the country within a reasonable amount of time.
It's a great location, and you alluded to this, but you have really great leadership at the state level that's actively encouraging this. You have all the pieces of the pie to do something really, really special, and you're doing something really special with automation in Texas. When did the North Central Texas Council of Governments say, okay, Tom, we really want to go all in on autonomous trucking. Can you lead this effort? How did that work about?
I started at the council in 2016. In 2017, the policy board adopted and invested in what we call AV 1.0 program. In 2018, it invested substantially more resources in our current AV 2.0 program. The legislature passed Senate Bill 2205 in 2017. And so we were out attending conferences, interacting with AV developer community, and on both moving people and freight. So it was, I think, our outreach to the industry, outreach to our partners within the state from TxDOT on down to other regional partners. And we did a lot of matchmaking where AV developers scouting for deployment locations, we waved our arms and said, you should consider DFW. It really offers a great location, great demographics, and a great regulatory environment with an MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, that wants to position the region as a leader in transportation technology. So those are the things. I think we just packaged our regional strengths and let it be known to the industry to come here.
Conferences in the early days of this industry, and you and I both know, it was amazing when I'm pitching Florida, you're pitching Texas. Oh, we're not going there. Oh, we're not going there. And then all suddenly, they're all coming to Florida and they're all coming to Texas. How are you continuing to drive this economic growth in automation, especially as Texas, the population just continues to expand and grow at rapid numbers?
Well, we're investing, I mentioned our AV 2.0 program. We're advancing 6 automated vehicle deployments, and we're moving from thinking of deployments as individual exercises. We're trying to build a regional AV program that has everything from sidewalk delivery bots. We are investing in what may become the nation's first automated truck port. That's one of the 6 projects. So we're signaling through our investments that we're open for business and willing to effectively partner with our private sector AV developer partners. And I do think that over time and kind of demonstrated support for the industry, it makes DFW and Texas itself an attractive location for the AV community.
You're investing and you're putting your money where your mouth is. What is your definition of a truck port? Could you kind of explain more of that and what the vision is for that?
For me, it's a simplistic vision. Think of ships coming in the port, and there's a transition point where they move to the tugboats come out and the tugboat takes over. Think of the truck port as the place where trucks transition from automated operation on the expressways to human operation on local streets as they connect from the expressways to the freight hubs. So the truck port is a way to effectively do those transitions, hopefully in a way that, industry finds useful. And that allows them to focus on automating the expressway trips while continuing to utilize human expertise in the more difficult operating environment of local streets.
It's a really interesting model, and it's a model that you could see looking into the future evolving, where perhaps more, and you go into Dallas more in an urban environment, you have a lot smaller one where a robot delivery can deliver Cheerios to a family that might have had the Cheerios and all these different items. It'll be really interesting because I think now where society's changed, where if you order a book, you don't want to wait 2 days for the book. You want to have the book within the hour. So it's going to be really interesting to see if your vision for a truck port becomes kind of smaller warehouses or industrial inside of dense urban areas. And it's not only the Dallas-Fort Worth region that's kicking butt on autonomy in Texas. There's several hubs. You've got Austin that's focusing on autonomous vehicles. And then you also have Houston that's focusing on autonomous delivery services. And Argo AI is testing in Austin. Neuro is very publicly testing in Houston. Why do you think the markets are evolving this way while delivery seems to trend towards Houston, passenger tends towards Austin? you've clearly explained why trucking has gone to the Dallas-Fort Worth region, but I'd love to know your opinion on the Austin and Houston regions.
Well, I think you underestimate the diversity in each of those markets. I mean, Houston has neuro, but it also had a very successful Easy My pilot on Texas Southern that plans to grow. And Houston Metro is a leader. They're working on building a AV transit vehicle from scratch. They're working on AV transit in their managed lane system. Austin, certainly with Argo AI and earlier Google deploying moving people, they just got Refraction AI delivering sidewalk delivery. DFW, we've had Starship delivery bots at UTD. We've had FedEx test in Plano and Frisco. We've moved with people with Drive AI and Easy Mile and now May Mobility deployment in Arlington. So all of the Texas cities are evolving into a very diverse AV environments.
And the Drive AI demo in Arlington was very successful. It ran in 2018 and 2019. They moved individuals. They published an incredible report about the data they gathered. What were your thoughts on that pilot? And did you have the opportunity to speak with any residents that actually took a ride in the vehicle?
Oh, sure. And we had Drive AI in both Frisco and Arlington. There was extensive partnership with those local communities, a lot of outreach, a lot of opportunities for the public to ride the vehicles, talk to the developers. The feedback was almost uniformly positive. I mean, we had situations where 250 folks in City Hall, kind of a Norman Rockwell moment of little kids asking questions about which form of LiDAR are on the vehicles. You know, you could just tell building a community interest in the AV. So, you know, all of our deployments, there's been a real effort to engage the public, to build interest and support, and the public's reciprocated by being very engaged with these AV deployments.
You brought a smile to my face, the Norman Rockwell. There's so many great Saturday Evening Post covers that he did. There's one in the Italian restaurant with the grandparents. They're all having this incredible bowl of pasta, and they're all smiling, and it looks like they're having a wonderful conversation. It's true Americana, so thank you for bringing the Norman Rockwell picture to my head because it brings smiles to my head. When your public's interacting with these autonomous vehicles, do they go down to the school level at all? Are there any interactions with the local schools where a child is studying engineering or is interested in this technology that can learn about it, experience about it, maybe work on a school project?
Yes, Frisco did that with both its delivery bot deployment with Starship and with the Drive AI deployment. And I'm glad you mentioned that because one of the important components of our AV 2.0 program is Dallas College, which runs the community college system in Dallas County, is standing up an AV-oriented curriculum. We're investing in that program and providing planning support for it. So they're going to be training kind of the next generation of transportation workers and with a focus on trucking and autonomy. So that's the community college level. We've also organized the North Texas Center for Mobility Technologies. That's a collaboration of our four major research universities, UNT, UTA, UTD, and SMU. And what that center does is pair industry that wants to sponsor research, so computing, materials, you name it, with kind of faculty dream teams. And then my organization, COG, and the universities are helping to subsidize that research. So basically, mobility companies come to DFW, tap into university talent at half the normal price. So that whole effort will then involve university students directly interacting with AV companies who are in those research programs. So we're very conscious. Our policy board has asked us to focus on the workforce implications, and we're looking for every opportunity to work with the AV companies to develop the curriculum and engage with the next generation of workers in the transportation and related sectors.
Beautiful part about this is, an individual going through the Dallas College program, through the autonomous vehicle curriculum, they can get an internship, and that internship can lead to a job. And there's this really great opportunity. So not only is you're helping the companies that are relocating to Texas, you're helping individuals that are interested in this technology that perhaps didn't want to move to California, or didn't want to move to Florida, wanted to stay in the Dallas-Fort Worth region because their families are there. You're putting all of the pieces together to do something really special. I mean, that's becoming the common trend here. You're doing something really special in the area. And then I'm going to shift here to Austin for a moment, because as Argo continues to test and prepare for their commercial deployment, John Davis, who's Ford's director of autonomous vehicles, said the following in a recent Yahoo interview. We want to be part of the city's transportation system and provide a service that makes people's lives better. What is your vision for how autonomous vehicles will be integrated into a city's transportation system? Because you clearly have an incredible, well-rounded vision around education and workforce. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on integrating autonomy into a city's transportation network.
Yeah, I think it's building on the partnership model that we've developed with our existing deployments. I don't think there is a specific infrastructure solution that we've been asked to deliver. The AV community has said we're going to solve the driving task in the vehicles themselves, and what you can provide, for example, information on work zones, perhaps making your signal phase and timing data from your traffic signals accessible to us, that will help, but it's not necessary for us to do the driving. So I think it's really having continued dialogue between the cities and the AV developers on what exactly is needed. And I think over time I've become more convinced that there'll be less required of the infrastructure than perhaps people 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago thought when they were thinking of expensive and complicated DSRC, roadside units, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's going to be a simpler deployment where, just like infrastructure, we use signage to assist human drivers, we'll use some infrastructure to assist AVs, but the driving task will be handled by the vehicles themselves. So dialogue and partnership where it makes sense, that's where I think we'll be going.
Partnerships are the key. You're 100% right about infrastructure. When I co-chaired the Autonomous Vehicle Task Force in the city of Beverly Hills in California, had the honor to speak with then Waymo CEO John Krafcik. And the city was like, we'll upgrade the infrastructure to this. He said, well, that's great. But the minute I go into LA, I don't have that. My vehicles have to be able to operate independently anywhere. And that was that big defining moment when CEO Waymo tells you not going to use it. It was that big stand-up moment. And I totally agree with you. You're going to see more edge computing, more power efficiency going into the autonomous vehicles. Micron's doing some really interesting energy efficiency work around the RAM. ARM is doing really interesting energy efficiency work. So I agree with you. It's going to go into the vehicle, less reliance on the infrastructure. Partnerships are key, but putting this all together, what are your thoughts in general on autonomous vehicles?
I think what we've learned is autonomy is not a magic solution to challenges that we face in our transportation system and providing safe, affordable mobility for all folks. So we have to step back, and the way we approach planning, the way we approach transportation investment, we have to kind of address first principles. What are we trying to accomplish? Connecting people to destinations. We want to do that safely and affordably. And so we have to ask how AVs can fit into our system to help us achieve those goals, as opposed to just focusing on AVs and saying, well, if we just have more AVs, all of our transportation challenges will be solved. So that's what I think is, again, not being fixated on the technology, but asking how can the technology serve our larger goals of safe, effective mobility and freight movement.
The technology is going to complement it. Perhaps it can extend an area where a service doesn't operate. If an individual has to go to, say, if they're working at a hospital and they're working late hours and there's not transit running in that hours, perhaps they can get in that autonomous vehicle to go to their job. So you're right. There's a lot of really interesting positive societal benefits of this technology. If we look at how do you integrate it into the existing options that are there today. And the trend, and you've put this a lot on your Twitter account, which is phenomenal, by the way, In Houston, Neuro, as we said, has been testing there, and the average commute time, 60 minutes. And in a November 2019 interview with the Washington Post, Yazel Kossett, who's the chief digital officer for Kroger, stated the following. A few years ago, we were telling customers that if they place an order today, we can have it ready for them tomorrow afternoon, and that was okay with them. Today, some of our customers will expect that same order to be available within the hour. Now, if you need a roasted chicken and a pizza and a bottle of milk in the next 45 minutes, I can fulfill that demand for the customer base because Neuro, which is a critical component of our delivery modalities. Today is 2021. Everything can be delivered. I mentioned the book analogy earlier in this podcast. How do you envision these delivery habits changing in the years to come?
I do think there's an opportunity to bring experiences, basically bring the store, the office, the consulting room, the workout space to people via mobility. So I am intrigued by, like, for example, Toyota's e-pallet platform, which would be large enough to, bring your personal trainer to you, or bring a selection of foodstuffs to you, or bring your doctor to you, or, et cetera, et cetera. So I could see delivery expanding from individual items to experiences and a richer sort of interaction than just having stuff dropped off.
Brought a smile to my face. That's my number one thing that I love more than anything about autonomous vehicles is the experiences. I've never thought of the workout one yet. During the pandemic, my wife and I got Apple Watches and we started using Apple Fitness and became absolutely addicted to it. It's a great workout and you can do it in your living room. But how great would it be if you can have the personal trainer come pull in your driveway, have the right weights, the right this. You're creating these really wonderful experiences. You're in the Dallas area. You've got an incredible baseball team with the Rangers. You've got America's football team with the Cowboys. Do you see some sort of sporting experiences eventually coming into the future where if there's individuals that fly into DFW from out of town, stay in a local hotel, go to one of your sporting events where they have a complete branded, customized experience? Let's use the Cowboys, for example. So, okay, you're going in the Cowboys vehicle, and when you get to the AT&T Stadium, perhaps there's a dedicated lane that can take them right in with no traffic. That was my dad's biggest pet peeve when he would go to a concert or a sporting event. No, I don't want to wait in this traffic. We gotta park far away and we can walk in. Do you see something like that emerging?
I could see, making the transportation experience part of the overall experience. I do know that the folks who operate our major entertainment venues and the cities that host them are leaders in the AV space. I'm thinking particularly of Plano and Frisco, but there are others. So I do think the association between automated vehicles and these special event type situations, there seems to be kind of a natural linkage that's developing. How it will play out, who knows?
Well, if you need somebody to come test it and give you real world honest feedback, please sign me up.
Okay. Consider it done.
Are there any Neuros or any sort of autonomous delivery services currently testing or operating in the Dallas-Fort Worth region?
Currently, I'm not aware of such, unless Starship has restarted at UTD, which you'll remind me to check that. We have a local presence from that company, and I'll just have to ping him. But I'm not currently aware of delivery. But you're smiling. Perhaps you know some industry intelligence that I'm not aware of.
I wish I did, because I would gladly, proudly tell you on this podcast. I wouldn't be surprised if Aurora, they're testing their autonomous vans and they're testing their autonomous trucks in Dallas. I wouldn't be surprised if one day they say, okay, we're going to start testing delivery. And that's why I'm smiling. Why did Aurora pick the region and say, okay, we're not just going to test trucks here, we're also going to test our autonomous minivans? What do you think went into that decision making?
Frankly, I can't speak to that, and I would prefer not to put words in the mouth of a very important firm in the local ecosystem. But I do know from conversations and a bit of speculation that, again, the regulatory environment and the great variety of operational design domains that a place like DFW offers, from kind of traditional compact downtowns to office campuses to relatively low density housing areas to commercial areas like Legacy that actually has employment levels equivalent to the downtowns. It's just an amazingly varied landscape and ecosystem. I think that's very attractive to developers. And then you add some of the things I've talked about previously, a good regulatory environment, local governments that welcome partnerships with the private sector. It just makes for a very good environmental situation. And I think with Aurora's case, I believe they have a partnership on the trucking side with PACCAR, which has a major facility in Denton, which is one of our major cities. So it would make sense, given that partnership, that they would focus on DFW.
I'll say this in my own words. I think it's absolutely awesome that they're testing both passenger and trucking in the region. I think it says a lot to the leadership of your state. It says a lot to your leadership, and it sends a very clear and loud signal that the Dallas-Fort Worth area is open for autonomous business. Monica Darwish, who's the policy counsel at Embark Trucks, has publicly said the following about the region. The Dallas-Fort Worth region is ripe for the nation's first deployment of automated commercial motor vehicles, given the sheer volume of the freight it sees, its location along major freight corridors, and the willingness of Texas lawmakers to engage in meaningful discussions around safety and education. There's a common denominator here. Every single individual that I've spoken to privately or I've quoted publicly here on the podcast loves what the region is doing to embrace this technology. You talked a little bit about the discussions, but could you dive a little more into when they want to come? Do you get a phone call and say, hey, Tom, we're thinking about coming here. Who do we need to talk to? How do those initial discussions work now that we're not a lot of conferences?
Well, I mean, now I am part of a network of folks in the region that are interested in building this ecosystem. One group we haven't talked about is the Lions Texas Mobility Innovation Zone. That is from Hillwood, which is a Perot family operation. They're standing up a major freight, logistics, and residential complex north of Fort Worth called Alliance. And they have amazing ambitions and amazing industry partners. So having them connecting the Alliance folks with industry is certainly important. Our regional chambers, starting with the Dallas Regional Chamber, but including Fort Worth, Arlington, and others, that's an important resource because our economic development directors are very interested in partnering and providing support. So, everything from finding real estate to looking for local incentives, all of those things, they're interested in building those partnerships. And then we have the folks on our Regional Transportation Council, our policy board, elected officials from around the region who have heard from our director, Michael Morris, and to some extent from me have been briefed on automated vehicles, are interested in the technology and supportive. And they're the ones who are driving their staff. Work with Tom and Michael at COG on automated vehicles. Let's position our community as a community that welcomes these technologies. So these forces all come together that when AV developers come to the region, there are folks who will meet with them, answer their calls, partner with them effectively. And I think that goes a long way to making this region an attractive one for AV developers.
And you have on the traditional developer side on real estate, you have Hillwood, which I believe is a Perot family company. Are they building any sort of communities very similar to what Voyage did in the villages outside of Orlando, where they're going to test autonomous passenger vehicles to increase the friendliness of the local communities and say, look, we're going to enable this service for you? Are you seeing anything like that starting to emerge there yet?
Not directly, but in terms of building. But the Hillwood was one of the folks who helped organize the Frisco Drive AI deployment. They are actively looking at the technology in some of their operations. We've had other developers approach us for information about AVs. So there's certainly strong developer interest in the technology. So I've had, I would say, conversations with 10 to 15 developers in the last 2 years about how might we incorporate or, should we be building parking garages the same way, or where might this technology fit in? And I think one of the opportunities for the AV developer space is that region between, I'll say, e-bikes and standard vehicles. I think these corporate campuses, these areas like Legacy that are developing into kind of mixed live, work, play environments, they need something that is less sizable, less space intensive than a standard vehicle, but offer folks more comfort than perhaps an e-bike in, Texas heat. So I think that you may see AVs emerge in that space. And that could be everything from scooters that park themselves and bikes that come to you when summoned to little pods that carry 2 to 4 people that, for example, connect corporate campuses to nearby dining, shopping, etc. So that's where I think the developers community is kind of waiting to see if we're going to get those kinds of vehicle types.
I like the smaller vehicles, especially in a master plan community. And you're right with the Texas heat, so you put the air conditioning there. But to the individuals in the industry, listen, please do not forget the trunk space. So if an individual or family goes to get groceries, they're going to need a place to put their groceries in there. I think that's an overlooked thing, and you make it comfortable. And it makes a lot of sense. And I have this whole thing. I'm a dad. I say, okay, you have to have a parent button if a child's in there where the parent could be the only one to unlock the door. If they're going to, so my daughter's going to go to, okay, I like to go to Susie's house to go, we're going to go play tic-tac-toe or something. Okay, I'll put you in the vehicle, but you got to have a dad button too. So I'm the only one that can unlock the doors. And that'll be really interesting to see as you take the AVs and you put them into real world applications. What are your thoughts on parking garages? You mentioned that you talked to 10 to 15 developers over the recent time, and they've asked you about parking garages. What are your thoughts on parking? Are they going to continue to be built at a certain way? Are they going to be transformed? Any thoughts?
2 things. One, there's a national movement to lift mandated parking minimums, and that should make it possible for developers to right-size parking to need. So I think that will help support the development of more bikeable, walkable, AV-able communities and spaces. So that's important. And then in terms of building parking structures, we've seen a couple in Dallas where rather than angled floors, you have flat floors, and they're built in a way that the space could be recycled. It may be recycled into living space, or it could be the delivery hubs that you mentioned recently, sort of like neighborhood hubs for freight. So I think developers are looking at parking structures as possibly recyclable space.
I think that's true. There's a developer that I know here in Florida that, due to the demand for office space here in South Florida, they are converting parking space into offices, and it's actively happening now. It's really neat when you got to speak to the developer and why they did this. He said, well, I've always believed in autonomous technology. I thought that was going to do it. I didn't realize that I was going to need the space because people were moving here. And so they built it that way. So it was really interesting, those benefits. And you guys continue to rock and roll in Texas, and Waymo's there now, running freight for J.B. Hunt from Fort Worth to Houston on Interstate 45. Is that the most trafficked freight route in the state?
Oh, I think I-35, I haven't studied the freight volumes between I-45 from Houston to Dallas or I-35 from the Laredo through Austin, San Antonio up to DFW. But both are very heavy freight corridors. We see AV deployments on both of them, as well as the I-20, which splits between I-30 and I-20 going east from DFW. We see AV deployments connecting to New Mexico, for example, through I-20. I-10 is a major corridor as well. And ultimately, those AVs will use I-10 to get to you in Florida. We see deployments all over, and certainly in freight planning and AVs, we're looking at all of the Texas expressways.
Well, hopefully they'll come here one day, but I have a sneaking suspicion they're going to keep rocking and rolling in your state for a while, because you have Kodiak Robotics there, you have Waymo, you have Aurora, and Too Simple. What's next? Is there somebody merging their way in, say, hey, we're going to pivot from passenger to trucking, and we call Tom and we're coming to Texas?
Well, you mentioned Monica from Embark. Let's start there. Embark and anyone else can certainly find me, and we can try to do the matchmaking that I've helped facilitate with other folks. But that's how. And it makes sense to have an ecosystem. Again, you mentioned before workforce. So having the four here already, those, again, developing the talent pool, getting the attention of public officials about the importance of this sector, coming to a metro area that is oriented and supportive of AVs, you can hit the ground running. You're not going to explain the levels of automation over and over and over again for the first time to mayors. You can come in and you can have decision makers say, skip the stuff we've already got. We've already done that. How can you add value? How can we add value to your operations and really hit the ground running? And then tap into, I mentioned the four universities who are focused on automation, making the talent pool available with kids coming out ready to go.
Johnny Morse from Embark's been on this podcast several times, and he's a listener. So, Johnny, if you're listening, Tom told you every reason why Embark needs to join the party in Texas. So let's make it happen, Embark. Come on, I'm rooting for you. We've covered a lot on autonomous vehicles, but Texas is also doing amazing things with electric vertical takeoff and landing at DFW. Rocking and rolling over there. American Airlines just invested in an eVTOL. What does the future hold for eVTOL at DFW? Is that just another way where the truck comes in and perhaps it's going to take a smaller piece of cargo and move it somewhere? Where do you see that going? Because there's this incredible, you've got the land ecosystem and now you're starting to build the air ecosystem.
Oh, I think you should do a separate podcast or two with my colleague Ernest Huffman, who runs our program. Just as we are focused on surface AVs, we have a similar program focused on the aerial side. He's done a wonderful job of pulling together literally 200-300 companies and interested parties. They're meeting regularly, a lot of enthusiasm. He helped engineer a partnership with NASA. We're one of a number of NASA selected partnerships that's just getting off the way. And we talk all the time because many of the players who are in the surface AV space are in the aerial AV space. And we, I think, are looking at opportunities to position the region where we don't care if it's done by air or by land. We just want it done safely, effectively, and to improve mobility and freight movement in the region. So we're agnostic as to how you do it. We'll work with you to make it happen. So I see increasing links in our program areas, and hopefully there may be overlaps in terms of shared communication technologies, things like that we're going to use this NASA collaboration to explore. But yeah, a lot going on in that space, very exciting. And like I say, I'm happy to work with my colleague Ernest on making that happen.
Ernest has a formal invitation to come on the Road to Autonomy to chat about this because I love eVTOL. So Ernest, if you're listening, please come on. I'd love to have this conversation with you. Tom, for a company that's considering relocating to Texas, what would you like them to know? They're going to pick up and move their whole operation very similar to when Toyota left Carson, California and moved to Texas.
Well, my sense is that you get a rapidly developing market. We're growing. I think we lead the nation in growth as a region by the Texas Triangle. So there's a foundation of a rapidly growing market. We're developing talent with our university system throughout the state, both here, Austin, College Station, Houston, very strong talent pools that are being developed, supportive government at all areas. And I think most importantly, on the public sector side, we are working together very effectively. We have something called the Texas Innovation Alliance. So the folks in Houston, Austin, DFW, San Antonio, El Paso, and elsewhere that are involved in transportation innovation, we are talking every 2 weeks. We're sharing ideas. We're sharing best practices. We're engaged with TxDOT's very much a part of that ecosystem. And so when AV developers come to us, we have an established routine where we get them down to Austin to meet with TxDOT, meet with the state police, meet with other important parties. And they reciprocate. When they come to state government and think about DFW, TxDOT will send them our way. And so we have this wonderful sense of friendly competition, but ultimately we recognize we're all in this together in the Texas Triangle, and we work together and support each other. That's just an amazingly powerful foundation for folks who are thinking of coming to Texas. You know, talent, resources, and a market, and a supportive regulatory environment. It's hard to beat that.
You can't beat it. And the communication is key, and you've clearly demonstrated during this podcast you care. You want to have an open conversation with these individuals and do right by your citizens and do right by the companies. And Tom, as we look to wrap up this extremely insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them?
I think the takeaway is really what I just outlined, which is Texas has, great strengths. It's a welcoming environment. We have the talent, the resources, the operating environment. We do public-private partnerships very effectively. That's a special strength in DFW, where we've worked with the private sector on standing up our managed lane system, which is a real important factor in our transportation system. We have a number of very creative toll authorities, including NTTA in Dallas-Fort Worth, which is a transportation technology leader. So the elements are all here for a very supportive ecosystem for folks who want to come to Texas.
The elements are there. If you do not want to come to Florida, I highly recommend you go to Texas, because Texas is doing things right. And as they say, they do things bigger in Texas. And I just can't wait to see what Tom and the crew at Texas do next, because the future is bright, the future is autonomous, and the future is Texas. Tom, thank you so much for coming on the Road to Autonomy today.
Great. Thank you for this opportunity.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter at Road to Autonomy, or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte & Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte & Company. The content discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.